My wife didn't book me a room. That's how I found out 23 years of marriage meant absolutely nothing to her. Standing in the marble lobby of the Grandview Resort and Spa, watching Sarah's friends giggle behind their manicured hands, I felt something cold settle in my chest. The kind of cold that comes before a man makes decisions he can't take back. "Oh, Danny," chirped Rebecca, Sarah's sister-in-law, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Didn't Sarah tell you? This is an elite retreat. Only the successful professionals get the luxury suites." She gestured toward the group of women clustered around my wife like vultures in designer clothing. "We simply couldn't justify the expense for her." She looked me up and down, taking in my work boots and flannel shirt. "Well, for everyone. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. My wife of 23 years, the woman I'd worked double shifts to put through law school, stood there examining her French manicure like it held the secrets of the universe. I see." I kept my voice level, though inside I was calculating. Calculating how much money I'd spent on this weekend getaway. Calculating how many times I'd been excluded from Sarah's new circle of friends. Calculating exactly when my wife had decided I wasn't worth basic human decency. The resort stretched around us like a monument to everything I wasn't supposed to be. Glass and chrome everywhere. Abstract art that probably cost more than my truck. Staff members who looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. The kind of place where they serve $12 coffee and call it an experience. "There's a lovely little motor lodge, about 15 minutes down the highway," Rebecca continued, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Much more appropriate for your budget." That's when I noticed the key in her hand. A single key card, not the two that should have been waiting for a married couple. "Rebecca," my wife finally spoke, but it wasn't to defend me. "Don't be cruel. Don't be cruel. Not you're wrong or Danny deserves better. Just don't be cruel," like I was a stray dog they were discussing whether to feed. I walked to the reception desk, where a young woman with kind eyes was pretending not to have witnessed my public humiliation. "Excuse me, is there anything available? Even a storage closet would be fine." She typed quickly, glancing nervously toward Sarah's group. "Actually, sir, we had a last-minute cancellation. It's not much, but there's a maintenance room that we've converted for overflow. It has a bed and a small bathroom." "Perfect." I took the key card, noting how Rebecca's face twisted with disappointment. She'd wanted me gone entirely, not just relegated to the servants' quarters. As I headed toward the elevator, I heard Sarah's friend Jennifer whisper, "Honestly, Sarah, why did you even bring him?" The elevator doors closed before I could hear my wife's response. Maybe that was for the best. My room turned out to be exactly what advertised: a converted maintenance closet with a narrow bed, a toilet, and a sink. But it was clean, and more importantly, it was away from the circus downstairs. I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling through 23 years of memories that suddenly felt like lies. The walls were thin. I could hear everything from the Russian businessmen next door, who'd apparently started their vacation early, with a bottle of vodka and what sounded like a wrestling match. Their laughter boomed through the walls, punctuated by crashes and shouting in a language I didn't understand. At first, I ignored it. I had bigger problems than noisy neighbors. But when the shouting turned to screaming and something heavy slammed against our shared wall, I realized the situation was escalating beyond drunk celebration. I stepped into the hallway just as Sarah and her friends emerged from the elevator, returning from whatever overpriced dinner they'd enjoyed without me. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying that particular pitch of women who'd had just enough wine to feel invincible. That's when the Russian's door burst open, and three massive men stumbled into the hallway, dragging their argument with them. The biggest Russian, a bear of a man with arms like tree trunks, was screaming at his companion in rapid-fire Russian while gripping a broken bottle. His friend, slightly smaller but no less intimidating, was bleeding from a cut on his forehead and shouting back just as angrily. Sarah's group froze. These women, so confident in their ability to dismiss and diminish people like me, suddenly looked very small and very fragile. "Ladies," the bleeding Russian said in heavily accented English, noticing them for the first time. His smile was predatory. "American ladies, very beautiful." Rebecca stepped backward, bumping into Jennifer, who let out a small whimper. Sarah, to her credit, tried to maintain her composure, but I could see her hands shaking. "We're just going to our room," Sarah said, her lawyer voice steady but strained. "No, no," the big Russian said, dropping his bottle with a crash. "It's party time. You come drink with us. We show you good time." That's when the third Russian emerged from their room, and I realized this wasn't just drunken celebration. The man was dragging a hotel employee, a young woman in a housekeeping uniform, who was clearly terrified. The situation had crossed a line. I've never been a big man, 5'10", maybe 170 soaking wet, but 25 years of construction work had given me something these Russians didn't expect: the ability to move fast and hit hard when it mattered. I stepped out of my doorway. Gentlemen, all three Russians turned toward me, and I could see the calculation in their eyes. Three of them, one of me, and I looked like exactly what I was: a middle-aged construction worker in work boots and flannel. "This is hotel business," the big one said. "You go back to room." Can't do that. I kept my voice conversational, the way I'd learned to talk to angry subcontractors who thought they could intimidate me. "See, you're scaring the ladies, and you're definitely scaring that young woman you're dragging around." The bleeding Russian laughed. "You think you stop us? You think you are hero? I think you're drunk and making bad decisions. I think you should let the girl go and sleep it off." Behind me, I heard Rebecca whisper, "Sarah, do something. Call security." But Sarah wasn't moving. None of them were. They were frozen, waiting for someone else to solve their problem. The big Russian took a step toward me. "You want to be hero? We show you what happens to heroes." That's when I moved. 25 years of swinging hammers and wrestling with steel beams had taught me that the first hit usually decided everything. I stepped inside his reach and drove my shoulder into his solar plexus, all my weight behind it. He folded like a bad poker hand, gasping for air. The second Russian came at me with the broken bottle, but he was drunk and telegraphing his moves like a semaphore operator. I caught his wrist, twisted until he dropped the bottle, then used his momentum to slam him face first into the wall. The third Russian, seeing his friends down, released the hotel employee and pulled something from his pocket. A knife, small but sharp. "Now you die," he snarled. But the girl he'd released was apparently tougher than she looked. As he focused on me, she grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and brought it down on the back of his head. He dropped like a sack of concrete. The hallway fell silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing and the big Russian's wheezing. I turned to check on Sarah and her friends. They were staring at me like I'd just sprouted wings and breathed fire. "Everyone okay?" I asked. The hotel employee, a young woman with determined eyes, nodded. "Thank you. They were getting aggressive." "Security's on the way," I told her, though I hadn't called anyone. But sure enough, 2 security guards rounded the corner at a run, followed by what looked like a manager. As the guards dealt with the Russians and the manager fussed over the employee, I found myself face to face with my wife and her friends. "That was," Sarah started, then stopped. "Unnecessary violence," Rebecca finished, her voice cold. "You could have just called security, instead of making a scene." I stared at her. "A scene? Yes, this is exactly the kind of behavior that—" She gestured vaguely. "Well, it's why you don't fit in with civilized people." Jennifer nodded. "There are proper ways to handle these situations. Civilized ways." I looked at the young woman who was giving her statement to security, then back at Rebecca. "Right, civilized." Sarah finally spoke. "Danny, maybe you should go back to your room." "Your room. Not our room. Not even the room. Your room." "You know what?" I said. "You're absolutely right." I walked back to my converted closet, closed the door, and sat on the narrow bed. Through the walls, I could hear the security guards dealing with the aftermath, the manager apologizing profusely, the normal sounds of a crisis being managed. But what I couldn't stop hearing was Rebecca's voice. "It's why you don't fit in with civilized people." I pulled out my phone and called the airline. I was packed and ready to leave by 6 a.m. The converted closet suddenly felt less like a humiliation and more like a gift. It had shown me exactly where I stood in my wife's new world. Sarah was waiting in the lobby when I came down with my bag. She looked like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair slightly mussed, her makeup not quite hiding the dark circles under her eyes. "Danny, we need to talk." "No," I said, walking past her toward the front desk. "We really don't." She followed me. "About last night. Last night was perfect." I handed my keycard to the desk clerk. It showed me everything I needed to see. "You're being dramatic." I turned to face her. "Am I? Your sister-in-law insults me to my face. Your friends treat me like hired help. And when 3 drunk Russians assault a hotel employee, I'm the one who's uncivilized for stopping them. Sarah's face flushed. Rebecca was just saying what you all think. What you think. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. These are divorce papers. I had my lawyer draw them up last month. The color drained from her face. Last month? You've been planning this? I've been watching, Sarah. Watching you change. Watching you decide that the man who worked double shifts to put you through law school isn't good enough for your new friends. Watching you choose them over me, again and again. She opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the papers. Danny, we can work this out. Marriage counseling or read page 3. She flipped to page 3, and I watched her face change as she read. You want the house? I want you out of the house. My name's on the deed, Sarah. Mine alone. Remember? You insisted we keep our finances separate when you started making partner money, said it was cleaner that way. But I've been living there for 8 years, which gives you no claim under state law. You have 30 days. She looked up from the papers, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. Danny, please, we can fix this. Can we? Can you look Rebecca in the eye and tell her she was wrong last night? Can you tell your friends that you're proud to be married to a construction worker? Can you introduce me at your law firm parties as your husband instead of just Danny? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'll be staying at Mike's until you move out, I said. Mike Torino, my oldest friend, had been offering me his spare room for months. My lawyer will be in touch about the details. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Behind me, Sarah called out, What about Emma? Our daughter, 22 years old, fresh out of college, and completely wrapped around her mother's finger. What about her? She'll want to know why. I stopped and turned back. Tell her the truth, Sarah. Tell her that her mother decided her husband wasn't good enough for her new life. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you standing up for me last night. Fair would have been you telling Rebecca to shut her mouth. Fair would have been you remembering that I'm your husband, not your embarrassing secret. I walked out of the resort and into the morning sun. My phone was already buzzing with texts from Mike. Plane lands at noon. I'll pick you up. Beer's cold. The taxi ride to the airport gave me time to think. 23 years of marriage, reduced to legal papers, and 30 days' notice. It should have felt devastating. Instead, it felt like waking up from a long, suffocating dream. My phone rang as we pulled into the airport. Sarah, Danny, please don't do this. It's already done. The girls think you're having a midlife crisis. The girls, her friends. Of course they'd already discussed it, analyzed it, dismissed it as male hysteria. What do you think, Sarah? Silence. That's what I thought. I ended the call and turned off the phone. At the airport bar, nursing a beer and waiting for my flight, I got a text from Mike. Heard about the papers. About time. Also heard about last night. Proud of you. How had he heard about last night? Then I remembered. Mike's daughter worked in hotel management. News traveled fast in small industries. Another text. Rebecca's been running her mouth about you for months. Sarah never defended you, not once. I stared at that message for a long time. Not once. My flight was called, and as I boarded the plane, I realized I wasn't just leaving a bad weekend behind. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had accepted being diminished, dismissed, and discarded. The old Danny would have tried to fix things, would have apologized for embarrassing Sarah, would have found a way to make himself smaller to fit into her new world. But the old Danny was gone, left behind in a converted maintenance closet at the Grandview Resort and Spa. Mike Torino looked exactly the same as he had 20 years ago, just with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. He was waiting at baggage claim with a beer in a paper bag and a grin that said he'd been expecting this day for months. About damn time, he said, pulling me into a back-slapping hug. I was starting to think you'd never grow a spine. Nice to see you too, Mike. Seriously, though, I'm proud of you. Sarah's been poisoned for years, and you finally called her on it? We walked through the airport, Mike carrying my bag despite my protests. How'd you hear about the resort thing? My daughter Lisa manages the Grandview. She said you dropped 3 Russians like they were made of paper. Also said Sarah's friends were calling you a violent brute before you were even off the property. I wasn't surprised. Rebecca and her crew had probably spent the entire morning crafting their version of events, turning me into the villain for having the audacity to stop an assault. What else did Lisa hear? Mike's grin faded. You sure you want to know? Hit me. Rebecca's been telling people you're having a breakdown. Says Sarah's been managing your instability for months. Says the divorce papers prove you're mentally unstable. We reached Mike's truck, a battered Ford that had seen better decades, but still ran like a dream. He threw my bag in the back and climbed behind the wheel. "There's more," he said, as we pulled out of the airport. "Of course there is. Sarah's been seeing someone. Has been for about 6 months." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Who?" "David Morrison. That real estate developer who's been buying up half the town. Rich boy, inherited daddy's business, thinks he's God's gift to women. David Morrison." I knew the name, knew the type. 40-something, never worked a real day in his life. The kind of man who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, and thought that made him superior. "How do you know?" "Lisa again. Morrison's been staying at the Grandview twice a week for months, always books the same suite. Sarah's been meeting him there." The pieces fell into place. Sarah's sudden interest in weekend getaways, her new wardrobe, paid for with her bonus money, the way she'd started working late more and more often. She planned this whole weekend, didn't she? The resort, the friends, leaving me out of the room arrangements. Mike nodded. "Lisa thinks Sarah was planning to ask for a divorce herself. Make it look like you abandoned her, walked out on the marriage. Then you went and filed first." We drove in silence for a while, through the familiar streets of our hometown. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, older, like the whole place was slowly winding down. "Mike?" "Yeah? I'm going to destroy her." He glanced at me, and I saw something like approval in his eyes. "Good. She's had it coming for years." Mike's house was a small ranch on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and far enough from neighbors to provide real privacy. The spare room was clean and simple, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the woods. "Make yourself at home," Mike said. "Stay as long as you need. I've got beer in the fridge and steaks for dinner." I unpacked my single bag, hanging my clothes in the small closet. It struck me how little I actually owned. Most of the furniture in the house I'd shared with Sarah was hers, bought with her money, chosen to fit her image of how successful people lived. My phone had 17 missed calls from Sarah and 43 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I called my lawyer, Tom Bradley. Tom had been my friend since high school, one of the few people who'd never been impressed by Sarah's success or intimidated by her sharp tongue. "Danny, how'd the weekend go? She got the papers this morning." "And? She's not taking it well. Also, she's been cheating. David Morrison, for about 6 months." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Can you prove it?" "Working on it. But Tom, there's something else. Her friends are saying I'm mentally unstable. They're going to try to paint me as dangerous. Because of the Russian thing?" "Lisa Torino already called me. She's willing to testify that you stopped an assault, nothing more. The hotel has security footage that backs up your version." "What about the divorce?" "Clean as a whistle. House is yours, truck is yours. Your business accounts are separate. She'll get half the joint savings, which isn't much since she's been spending most of it on her new lifestyle." "What about alimony?" Tom laughed. "She makes 3 times what you do, Danny. If anything, you could ask for alimony from her." That evening, Mike and I sat on his back porch, drinking beer and watching the sun set through the trees. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "So what's the plan?" Mike asked. "First, I need to know everything about Morrison, everything about Sarah's affair, everything about what they've been saying about me. And then?" I took a long drink of beer, thinking about Rebecca's sneer, about Sarah's refusal to defend me, about 23 years of marriage ending with divorce papers in a hotel lobby. Then I'm going to show them what unstable really looks like. The next morning, I drove to my office, a small building I owned outright, housing my construction consulting business. 25 years of working construction had taught me enough about project management and building codes to make a decent living helping other contractors avoid costly mistakes. My secretary, Janet, looked up from her computer with the expression of someone who'd been fielding difficult phone calls all morning. "Your wife's been calling every 15 minutes since 8 a.m., she said. "Also, some woman named Rebecca called 3 times, demanding to speak with you about your inappropriate behavior. Take messages for Sarah, hang up on Rebecca." Janet grinned. She'd never liked Sarah, though she'd been too professional to say so. "Already started hanging up on Rebecca. Figured you wouldn't want to deal with that particular brand of crazy." I poured myself coffee and settled at my desk. "What's on the schedule today?" "Morrison Development called yesterday. They want you to consult on that new shopping center project. I looked up sharply. David Morrison called here? His assistant did. Wants to set up a meeting for later this week. Janet paused. Isn't that the guy who's been— Yeah, that's the guy. I stared at the message slip, turning it over in my hands. Morrison wanted to hire me. The man who was sleeping with my wife wanted to hire me to work on his project. The arrogance was breathtaking. Janet, call them back. Set up the meeting for Thursday afternoon. You sure about that? Very sure. I spent the morning making phone calls, reaching out to contacts throughout the construction industry. By lunch, I had a clear picture of David Morrison's business practices, and it wasn't pretty. Morrison Development was leveraged to the hilt, relying on a complex web of loans and investor money to fund their projects. They cut corners wherever possible, hired the cheapest subcontractors they could find, and had a reputation for being slow to pay their bills. More importantly, they were currently in violation of several building codes on their current project, violations that could shut down construction and cost them millions if reported to the right authorities. I made copies of the relevant building codes and inspection reports, then drove across town to the construction site. It was easy enough to walk the perimeter, taking photos of the obvious violations with my phone, foundation work that didn't meet current seismic requirements, electrical installations that violated fire safety codes, plumbing that was already showing signs of poor installation. Morrison was building a disaster, and when it inevitably failed inspection, his investors would lose everything. Unless, of course, someone with the right expertise helped him fix the problems before they became public. My phone rang as I was driving back to the office. Sarah, Danny, please, we need to talk. No, we don't. Morrison wants to hire you for his shopping center project. I told him you were the best construction consultant in the state. I pulled over to the side of the road. You told him what? I thought it might help. Bridge the gap between us. Show that there's no hard feelings. No hard feelings. I repeated the words slowly. Sarah, you've been sleeping with this man for 6 months. Silence. You thought hiring me would bridge the gap? Danny, I never meant for things to go this far. David and I, we connected. He understands my world in a way that I don't. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. I pulled back into traffic. Tell Morrison I'll take the meeting, Thursday at 2. Really? Danny, that's wonderful. Maybe we can— Sarah, don't mistake this for forgiveness. I'm taking the meeting because it serves my purposes, not yours. I hung up and called Tom Bradley. I need you to research something for me, I said when he answered. Morrison Development. I want to know everything about their financing, their investors, their current legal exposure. Planning something? Planning to give them exactly what they deserve. That evening, Mike and I met at Murphy's Bar, a dive on the wrong side of town that served the best burgers in the county and didn't care if your clothes had sawdust on them. Learn anything interesting today? Mike asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Morrison's broke. Technically solvent, but only barely. His shopping center project is a house of cards, held together with investor money and bank loans. And he's cutting corners to save money. The building won't pass final inspection unless someone fixes about $50,000 worth of code violations. Mike grinned. Someone like you. Someone exactly like me. We ordered burgers and beer, and I filled Mike in on the details. Morrison needed my expertise to save his project, but he had no idea that I knew about his relationship with Sarah. So what's the play? Mike asked. I'm going to help him. I'm going to fix every code violation, solve every problem, make sure his project passes inspection with flying colors. Mike looked confused. That doesn't sound like revenge. It's not. That's just the setup. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken at the construction site. See these violations? They're not accidental. Morrison's been deliberately cutting corners, using substandard materials, ignoring safety requirements. He's been doing it for years. So I'm going to document everything, every violation, every shortcut, every instance of him knowingly ignoring building codes. And then, after his project is complete and his investors have paid him, Mike's grin widened as he understood. You're going to turn him in. I'm going to bury him. Morrison Development will be finished. His investors will sue him into bankruptcy. His reputation will be destroyed. And Sarah? I took a long drink of beer. Sarah chose her side. She can go down with him. Thursday afternoon, I drove to Morrison Development's offices in the financial district downtown. The building was all glass and steel, The kind of place designed to intimidate visitors and remind them that serious money was made here. David Morrison's office was on the 20th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city. Morrison himself was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, tanned, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Danny. He stood up from behind his massive desk, extending a manicured hand. Sarah's told me so much about you. I'm excited to finally meet. I shook his hand, noting the soft palm and weak grip. Mr. Morrison, please call me David. We're practically family, right? Family. The man who was sleeping with my wife wanted me to call him family. Have a seat, he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine. He settled back into his chair, all smiles and false warmth. Sarah says you're the best construction consultant in the state. Said you've never met a building problem you couldn't solve. I've been doing this for 25 years. Excellent. That's exactly the kind of experience we need. He slid a folder across the desk. This is our current project. Grandview Shopping Center. Retail space. Restaurants. A small office complex. $50 million development. I opened the folder, scanning the plans and specifications. It was ambitious, I'd give him that. Also completely unrealistic, given the timeline and budget. When do you need this completed? 6 months. We've got investors flying in from Tokyo in 7 months for the grand opening. Everything has to be perfect. 6 months. I pretended to study the plans more carefully. That's aggressive, but doable, right? Sarah said you were the kind of man who could work miracles. Sarah had said a lot of things, apparently. I wondered what else she'd told him about me. About our marriage, about why she was planning to leave me, about what kind of man she thought I was. There are some challenges, I said finally. I drove by the site yesterday. There are several code violations that will need to be addressed before you can pass final inspection. Morrison's smile flickered. Violations? My project manager assured me everything was up to code. Your project manager was wrong. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken. Foundation work doesn't meet current seismic requirements. Electrical installations violate fire safety codes. Plumbing is substandard. His face went pale as he scrolled through the photos. How much will it cost to fix these issues? 50,000, minimum. Probably closer to 75. 75,000? He set down the phone, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. That's not in the budget. Then you're not going to pass inspection. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. What if we found a way to make the inspection process go more smoothly? I looked at him carefully. I'm not sure I understand. Building inspectors are just people, right? People who might be willing to overlook minor issues if properly motivated. He was asking me to help him bribe a building inspector. The arrogance was stunning. Mr. Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't work that way. Of course not. I didn't mean to suggest. He forced a smile. I'm just under a lot of pressure here. Investors, deadlines, you know how it is. I know exactly how it is, which is why I'm going to make you an offer. He leaned forward. I'm listening. I'll fix every code violation on your site. I'll manage the inspection process personally, make sure everything passes with flying colors. I'll guarantee your project opens on time and under budget. That sounds expensive. $20,000, flat fee. Morrison blinked. $20,000 for $75,000 worth of work. I have relationships with subcontractors who owe me favors. I can get materials at cost, and I'm very good at finding creative solutions to expensive problems. Why would you do that? Why would you practically give away that kind of expertise? I stood up, extending my hand. Because Sarah asked me to help you. Because she believes in your project. Because she wants this to succeed. He shook my hand, still looking confused but grateful. This is incredibly generous. I'll need complete access to the site, full authority to hire and fire subcontractors, and a free hand to fix the problems however I see fit. Done. Absolutely. Whatever you need. I'll start Monday morning. As I walked to the elevator, I could feel Morrison watching me through his office windows. He was probably wondering what kind of man would help the person sleeping with his wife. He was about to find out. I called Tom Bradley from the parking garage. It's done. I'm officially Morrison's construction consultant. And he has no idea you know about the affair. None. He thinks I'm doing this as a favor to Sarah. Danny, what you're planning, it's going to destroy more than just Morrison. Sarah's going to get caught in the crossfire. I sat in my truck, looking up at the glass tower where Morrison was probably already calling Sarah to tell her about our meeting. Tom, Sarah made her choice 6 months ago. She chose him over me, chose his world over ours, chose to lie to me every day for half a year. Whatever happens to her now, she brought on herself. And Emma, your daughter's going to be caught in this too. Emma, 22 years old, fresh out of college, completely unaware that her parents' marriage was about to become a public disaster. Emma will understand eventually, when she's older, when she sees what kind of person her mother really is. I hope you're right. I am right. And Tom? Start preparing the paperwork. When this is over, I want Morrison Development sued into bankruptcy. I want every investor, every bank, every creditor coming after him at once. That's going to require evidence of deliberate fraud. I'll get you evidence, more than you'll know what to do with. I drove home through the early evening traffic, past the familiar streets and landmarks of a life I was systematically dismantling. By this time next month, Morrison would be ruined, Sarah would be disgraced, and I would be free. It was going to be the most expensive divorce in the county's history, and it was going to be worth every penny.